All right, this next panel examines how AI and Islamic Fintech are working hand in hand to create cutting-edge innovation without compromising ethical and Sharia-aligned principles. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce your moderator for this session, Daud Vicary, Managing Director from DVA Consulting, and our esteemed lineup of panelists, Mohammad, Ridzuan, Abdul, Aziz from Fintech Association of Malaysia, Dafinah, Ahmed, Hilmi, Hong Leong Islamic Bank, and Dr. Hurriyah Islamy from HGC Firm. All right, over to you, Daud.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? So far, nodding of heads. Right, that's good. I look quite elderly. I have to declare my age. I'm in my 8th decade. And one former boss, when I first started work in the early 1970s, said to me, "You learn the job by touching all the paper." Obviously, AI has nothing to do with all the paper, or does it? During those 8 decades, I've seen 6 major developments in technology. Firstly, centralized accounting. Next, management information systems, which then morphed into relational database management systems, which we used extensively in the mid-1980s to do asset management and asset trading and derivative trading. We then moved on in the late 80s and 90s to massive decision support systems, which were using terabytes of data. And of course, we then moved into the internet. And now the 6th, we have AI. In my humble opinion, and I'll get the panel to discuss it in the next 30 or 40 minutes, there is an opportunity for the ethical values that are embedded in Islamic finance and the objectives of the Maqasid al-Sharia to help drive innovation and transformation and to act as a catalyst for change to improve sustainability, planetary health through values-based intermediation using artificial intelligence sensibly. Before I introduce the panel in a little bit more detail, can we have a quick show of hands, just to show if you're awake? How many in the audience know anything about Islamic finance? Show a hand. A few, okay. So that gives us a gauge that many of you in this audience don't understand anything about Islamic finance. So for the Islamic finance consultants and bankers here, business opportunity. But we'll keep this at a fairly straightforward and low level. To help me discuss the topic, I'm going to go from far end to near end. Dr. Hurriyah Islamy, who's the managing director of the HGC group. I hesitate to use the word old friend because it has the wrong connotation, but we've known each other some time and worked together on many occasions. We also have Puan Dafinah Ahmed Hilmi, who's the CEO of Hong Leong Islamic Bank. And I have a particular affection for that bank because I set it up 20 years ago. And she's continuing, I hope, probably in an improved vein from what I was able to do then. And then last but by no means least, my dear brother, Mohammad Ridzuan Abdul Aziz, who is an independent director at Aeon Digital Bank, a digital Islamic bank, but also is an advisor to the Fintech Association here in Malaysia. So the format I'm going to go through is to get each of them to spend 2 minutes, and I'll be quite strict on time, as all of them know, just to say what they see are the issues on this topic in terms of ethical values, in terms of the governance around Islamic finance and AI. So, Ridzuan, I'll get the boys to go first. And I have to add, I'm delighted that we've actually got a gender-balanced panel. I signed a pledge 20 years ago that I would not appear on any panel unless it had gender balance, and I've been able to maintain that for 20 years. So I'm delighted we have a gender-balanced panel. Ridzuan, 2 minutes.
Thank you.
I'll start the stopwatch now, shall I?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. It's very, very, happy to be here and sitting in this esteemed panel session. So as far as AI in the current context and the topic of our discussion today, I think the concern that I have as a practitioner and as someone who is really involved in financial technology here in Malaysia as well as the region, one of the key concerns I have is the understanding about artificial intelligence in the context of how it is being built, how it is being used, and how it is going to be governed. I think concern that I have really close to my heart is really an understanding AI in the context of how it is interacting directly with us as a person and using artificial intelligence in terms of optimizing some of the processes and some of the technological solution that we have. So you can understand that, say for example, like ChatGPT is very well known for people to use it to get ideas and to help them. But there are also capabilities where agentic AI can help you to improve and optimize certain processes. And in doing so, particularly in the Islamic finance context, there are certain ethical as well as principles that we need to understand. And looking at the show of hands just now, I am really happy to share with you about how AI from the context of individual as well as from enterprise can be discussed from the Islamic finance context and perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Ridzuan. Dafinah, your 2-minute opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Daud. So given we're given 2 minutes, I need to summarize everything within breakneck speed. Just like how AI is already transforming everything that we do in our daily affairs, whether personally or within our work environment. So I am with Hong Leong Islamic Bank, and actually, Daud, this is our 20th year anniversary since we became an Islamic subsidiary of Hong Leong Bank. When it comes to the challenges of AI, now within the financial institution of Hong Leong Islamic Bank, we always look at, building customer-centric propositions which are digital at the core. So we very much look at ourselves as a tech player, looking at customer centricity propositions. Now, what that means is that as we look into leveraging on artificial intelligence and how digital transformation has changed the way we bank or the way we look at financial institutions, it becomes more imperative that we do it responsibly. Now, coming from the Islamic banking fraternity, being responsible is about having the amanah, the trust, as custodians of customers' deposits or funds that we manage for customers. We need to ensure how we mobilize this responsibly and making sure customers' data is protected. I think in today's environment, when we talk about AI, there is a lot of discussion about scams, deep fakes. So how do we mold all this to make sure, as an Islamic financial institution, we are able to have the higher purpose of Maqasid al-Sharia, which is really about the outcomes of Sharia. It's really about making sure that customers, they are well informed, they are well protected in terms of their wealth. How do we do that? And I think this is the challenge. As we scale, as we develop products and solutions, as we look into innovation, using AI, Gen AI, agentic AI, and all the evolution that we are seeing, it becomes even more imperative that customers' trusts are kept, customers' information are also controlled, and how do we minimize what I can say black boxes or minimize all these uncertainties? Because as in Islamic banking and finance, it's really about reducing or avoiding speculation and removing any excessive unwanted gains that may arise from the development of AI. Thank you.
Thanks, Dafinah. Hurriyah, your 2 minutes start now.
Right, thank you. Because in your question you say key issues, so only only one is allowed. I actually spent some time to find which one I think is most important, the most pertinent. I would say value proposition. There is what's in it for me, how it can benefit me, and this applies for both the AI and the IF. IF is the short form for Islamic finance. Because as we all know, AI was introduced back in 1956. And Islamic finance has rooted from 1400 years ago. But we only heard about them recently. Islamic finance maybe the past 2 decades, AI the past 2 years or so. Why? If it is that good, it should have been very, very popular at that time. But why? From 1956 only now? Why from 1400 years ago only now? Because of the value proposition. We need to have the value proposition for each and everyone in there. The issue with the Islamic finance though, we are too busy competing with the conventional. In the sense that we try to actually compete with them in the area that they are already progressed. We are competing on the form rather than the substance. Because if we are looking into the Islamic finance in its own substance, you are asking about innovation. We have a huge area for innovation that only Islamic finance can venture into. Conventional cannot do. Likewise for the ethical compliance. We are far more superior because the very fundamental use in the financial system is riba, interest. Why it is forbidden in Islam? Because this is the cause for social injustice, financial issues. That's why it is forbidden in Islam. And not only that, there are other areas which can actually cause damage to the society, to the people at large. They are also forbidden in Islam. So by itself, by its very core nature, Islamic finance is already ethical. You cannot call it Islamic finance unless it is ethical, because everything that is unethical are forbidden by Islam. So how can you call it Islamic finance if it does not comply with the Islamic principles? Yeah. So like for example, they introduced this ESG. We already have halalan toyiban since 1400 years ago, and our halalan toyiban has been proven more superior than the concept of ESG, because ESG, the past few years, after the 7th October, we could see those who actually promote ESG have been quiet in certain areas. Yeah? And SDG, we have a far superior concept. There is Maqasid Syariah that has been there 1400 years ago. The UN has just introduced SDG for the last couple of decades. So the point is, we really need to treat each IF and AI accordingly and recognize and optimize the potential for both the IF and AI. And if I may quote what Tom Cruise said in Jerry Maguire, show me the money.
Okay. Dr. Hurriyah, thank you. In many ways, you've answered the first question that I was going to ask the whole panel about the foundational alignment here. And you've quite rightly suggested that the SDGs were preceded by the objectives of the Maqasid of Sharia 1400 years before, but it's getting that message across. And also in terms of the question of riba or paying interest, I have to remind the audience that actually riba and interest is forbidden by all 3 Abrahamic religions. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam forbid interest. Okay? It's only Islam that has persisted with this. So thank you for drawing attention to that. But let me be a bit more specific in terms of my opening question on foundational alignment. You've already answered that question in terms of the value proposition, so I won't probe that. But in terms of your practical experience, and I think this is directed more to Sister Dafinah first, and possibly I'll get Ridzuan to answer this. What challenges have you encountered when trying to explain AI decision-making processes to your Sharia board? How have you addressed this? How have you brought this up to speed? So it's like the concept of the Sharia board to many seems like it's an archaic institution. I would strongly argue it's not. But how have you addressed bringing them up to speed on this important topic?
Okay. So when it comes to AI within the organization, all of us within the bank are expected to equip ourselves with the AI knowledge. What that means is that across Hong Leong Banking Group, about 7,000 plus staff, all have access to using AI tools under Gemini to make sure that we can ease our daily work. For example, using AI to take minutes in meetings, using AI to look at how other areas we can streamline processes, how we can look into providing information about targeted customers, profile and what are the solutions that can support. So I think the genesis or what the bank's vision is when it comes to being a digital bank plus more, AI is very, very much part of that. Now, why I wanted to share this point is because I think in any organization, having the clear mandate of what does AI mean and what does that vision entail is important because it becomes a top-down directive. And that means everybody has to ensure that they equip themselves with the knowledge. So what this means is that even when we look into our processes, for example, within the Islamic bank, there is a lot of, I would say, sequencing. We need to trace from the first point that the customer comes into the bank when the contract is being provided up to the time of dispersal or up to the point of a deposit is being done. All that has to be tracked and traced. And how do we do that? I think through AI would really, really help. So today, the board, Sharia Committee's expectations for us, within, when I say us, I mean the Islamic Bank, is to make sure we actually use AI tools to help to manage all the Sharia nuances that is applicable within the Islamic Bank. So it is a discussion that I would not say it's not a difficult discussion to have because there is already that buy-in all the way from the top across the bank. But I think what is important is how do we do this responsibly? And I think just to add to Dr. Hurriyah's point, what's in it for me? What is the value proposition? What are we trying to achieve? What is a pain point that we want to do here as a financial institution, a financial intermediary? And it has to be aligned with our role as a trustee, custodian of customers' deposits.
Thank you for that. It comes back to value proposition, which I think will be a constant theme here. Ridzuan, is there anything you want to add to that answer, or can I move on to a second?
Move on to the second one.
I'll move on to the second one, which is really around data governance architectures, which sounds like a very complicated matter. It isn't, but what specific data governance frameworks are ASEAN Islamic Fintechs organizations implementing to ensure both regulatory compliance and Sharia adherence, particularly around this issue that you've both raised, or in fact all three of you have raised, around consent and privacy management for your customers. What do you see as the issues around that data governance architecture? I'll start with you, Ridzuan, if I may.
Yeah. I think if you talk about it from the ASEAN platform, this is actually a very challenging and interesting as well matters. First and foremost, ASEAN is not like the EU, okay? And then when you talk about governance in terms of using AI, and as mentioned, I think in many sessions prior to this, AI could only be effective if you really understand how to manage the data properly, and you really understand how do you want to continuously build and establish what we call a data management framework. So a framework in Malaysia is going to be different from a framework in another country in ASEAN. So that's the challenge. There's very difficult, for us to come together and have a standard way of how we look at data structure that will drive eventually how we're going to build the AI. So, and this is also going to become one of the pertinent matters in terms of how then the AI that you're going to build based on a very diverse way of data management is going to look at the Islamic finance practices in each of the country that wish to use Islamic finance in their, for example, in their banking sector, for example, yeah. So this would, to me, it's also an opportunity, because if you understand really the concept of Maqasid Sharia, as well as how Islamic finance has actually been practiced in Malaysia, there's a lot of opportunities for AI and generally digitalization could be aligned to what Islamic finance is offering, not only at the enterprise level, not only at the individual level, but also at many levels, including infrastructure as well as some national level policies as well. So I just want to bring one example. Recently, I get involved with an idea of how monetary system actually can be revamped if we use digitalization, particularly in terms of looking at how we want to use AI in creating a digital currency, for example. So the idea of putting in a common basket of certain number of commodities together with the existing how we actually value our currency using the notional value of the economy that we have is really intriguing, and I'm really actually very excited to explore this further. So what I'm trying to say here is you can actually be very, very innovative in terms of how you want to use AI, and it can also be something that becoming what we call a universal value in terms of how Islamic finance can be applied, not only in ASEAN, but throughout the world. So again, it is basically about awareness, understanding also relevant context, as well as in terms of how you want to implement it. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next question, but I think you've raised something interesting which we'll come back to if we have time, and I'm sure we'll make time there, about how we actually move this away from national borders to being universal. And effectively the implications that this would have is that I'm not sure what the technology would be, but I'll just wave a phone around here, a smartphone. At the moment, everybody would use a smartphone, and their entire asset value and the way in which they negotiate using that asset value through an AI agent could be used to negotiate with anybody, and you cut out all the intermediaries. Sorry, bankers, but effectively it's just person to person, throughout. Interesting concept. Let me move on to the area of transparency and explainability. And as I mentioned, I'm of what's called the baby boomer generation, so I'm into my 70s, and one of the challenges is going to be explaining this or speaking to the listening of everybody in the audience. And everybody in the audience is coming from different backgrounds and different age groups. So given that Islamic finance has a requirement for transparency for all transactions, how are organizations building AI systems that can provide clear expectations for their decisions, especially in complex areas like credit scoring or indeed investment recommendations, which are the obvious areas in there? Hurriyah, let me get you to answer that briefly, if you can, and then I'll move to you, Dafinah, because I'm sure you're in the forefront of looking at this as well.
It's interesting that you did mention about, for example, investment, how to make a choice on investment, because I was the external examiner for one brother doing PhD in Brussels, where he basically using machine learning to have the algorithm to allow any investors who would like to have Sharia compliant product just to use it. So it's interesting in the sense that now we are going back to your issue of transparency. In Islam, in Sharia, transparency is just a must. It's a fundamental, it's the core value of Sharia itself. And for Islamic financial institution, this is also not something that they can run from, because they have this biggest asset that is the license, and there's always the threat that unless they actually comply with the transparency requirement, otherwise the license could be revoked. But this is not the case with the AI.
It's a little close.
This is not the case with the AI industry, because basically this area is not licensed and shouldn't be licensed. Now, I'm not suggesting otherwise. It's just that, of course, we have to have these standards with respect to transparency, with respect to the data governance, the infrastructure and all that. Because the truth is, back in 2022, when they just introduced ChatGPT, I did try to use, to play on Islamic finance using ChatGPT. Believe me, it was rubbish. So basically, that's why the name is artificial intelligence. Basically, whatever you put there, whatever data available, junk in, junk out. So it's not, in this case, it's not the rubbish for someone, it's treasure for someone else. No, it's still rubbish. Yeah. So when it comes to data governance, it is very important not only on the transparency, but also the quality of the data. And this is where Islamic financial industry people, the players, IF players, we are also equally responsible. Because what happened there, most people who post online, remember, they actually collect data from online resources. Most of IF quality materials are not available online at the moment. Those that you find online, mostly newbies, not the people from Daud generation for sure. So no, what I'm saying is the quality is still missing. That's why junk in, junk out. So it is the responsibility of IF players to contribute to also to make sure that we have good quality there so that it could become treasure in, treasure out. Yeah, that's one thing. And if we are talking about seriously, of course, for the II industry, this would be among the things expected of you when it comes to providing the data governance services for the Islamic financial institution. First, of course, ethical alignment, because unless you adhere to this, you will not even have a room in the Islamic finance. Second, trust and confidence, because this is fundamental in Islamic finance as well. Accountability and governance, you have to comply with that. Fairness and clarity in contracts. Regulatory compliance, this is, there's no way you can actually run away from this either. And stakeholders information, how to achieve. Of course, you need to have clear product disclosure, robust governance structure, Sharia governance. I cannot even read this, my own handwriting. Sharia governance, compliance, and regulatory framework. So when you comply with all this, inshallah, the Islamic finance institution out there will be ready to embrace the technology that you would like to introduce to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hurriyah. And I'll re-emphasize this, you know, garbage in, garbage out is what you say, but I think we need to be moving to a maxim where it's value in and value out in terms of that. Dafinah, is there anything you want to add on this? I'm conscious of time and we're probably going to be playing hurry up to finish in 10 minutes, but let's get your answer.
So this comment is about transparency. So when we look at any AI or machine learning output, you know, how do we explain, you know, what the outcome is? I think it's very important, right? Like, what was the decision that was made so that stakeholders, including, you know, customers, understand why such decision was being made. I think that is very, very important. So a lot of the AI and ML, you know, models, it has to be designed where this explainability is being clearly articulated. I just want to share, you know, recently, Hong Leong Bank, you know, we partnered with DCAP Digital, looking at AI credit scoring models to support some of the motorcycle, you know, dealers and users. So it is using AI, it is using ML systems to basically churn out how these, you know, eligible motorcyclists can get their financing. So again, you know, I think for any applicant, you know, coming onto that, once we launch it, is a question of, do they know why they did not, you know, why they were not able to get the financing? I think that has to be part of how we explain it. And early this year, we actually collaborated with PayNet together with one of our social enterprises, Suri Lifestyle, that looks at single mothers. And we actually, you know, provided some form of a zero profit financing. And we worked with Islamic Fintech called Go Barakah that looks at the traceability of, you know, of where the payment was going to. So it is important because when we talk about doing good or doing social good, right? We know the intention is that we wanted to support, you know, this certain selected group of customers. But how are those monies being applied? Of course, we just leave it to, okay, you know, we know that is how the arrangement agreement is. But I think having that traceability in terms of how the monies are being used, where is it being paid to, it adds to the entire transparency of the entire process.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to share.
In a way, you've anticipated the next question about accountability and risk management. So I'll probably skip that because we're down to our last 7 minutes. So I want to ask one final question and then go into a wrap up. And the final question is in two parts. One is about what do we need to do to further regional coordination around standards? So I'm looking here at ASEAN, but also in terms of product innovation. And Dafinah, you already mentioned a couple of products you're involved in, but is there an opportunity in terms of future pathways to tackle some of the problems? You know, for example, those of you, and there are a few of you in the room who are, you know, focused or know something about Islamic finance, there is a big challenge in Islamic finance right now in terms of concentration risk around tawarruk and commodity murabaha, which maybe AI could help us get out of. So it's a two-pronged question. I'll get all of you to, you know, to do a very brief answer. Where do you see regional coordination coming in terms of standards, and what do you see as the key areas for future product development? Ridzuan, perhaps you'd like to start, and I'll just go down the line briefly.
Yeah. So I think for regional coordination, we can really, as I said just now in my last comment, look at certain common commodities that we can use in terms of how it can become an underlying value for certain transaction to actually be empowering in some of the Islamic finance transaction, like what Daud mentioned about tawarruk and commodity murabaha. I think there's a division in terms of application and implementation of some of the contracts, and I think AI could actually enlarge the pool of understanding in terms of how these actually can be structured, and not necessarily, I sound like a contrarian here, that we need to have a common standard that everybody agree, but when it comes to practical implementation, actually there are a lot of rooms where AI can enlarge understanding in terms of how implementation can be facilitated. So that would give a lot of potential in terms of how we could look into options on how certain countries or certain practices or certain jurisdiction look into certain common contract like tawarruk and commodity murabaha in a context that can be localized but not actually compromising the basic principle of the Islamic finance. I'll stop there.
Okay. Dafinah, I'll move to you in terms of what do you see in the pipeline for future development, for the future of Islamic finance, mobilizing AI.
One of the things that we're working on right now is on using AI to detect Sharia non-compliant incidents. I think this is one of the biggest issues or one of the risks that Islamic banks face, and using AI to be able to detect such potential cases is something that we are actually working on. And I think when we talk about the whole, cross-border, how do we bring Islamic Fintech beyond borders, beyond Malaysia, there has to be greater coordination. It's just like when we looked into cross-border QR payments, for example, we have to work with other countries. I think for Malaysia already taking the lead when it comes to having a very strong and a robust regulatory framework. What can we do to leverage on that framework, and what are the learnings that can be shared with the other countries to ensure that, and again, going back to the whole Maqasid al-Sharia, is to promote financial inclusion. How do we mobilize capital, philanthropic capital into supporting efforts like Waqaf, Zakat, which are Islamic social finance instruments that we don't really talk about how we want to scale because of its own set of limitations and challenges. But I strongly believe if we are able to redistribute wealth and channel that to projects or objectives that does support the upliftment of communities, of societies, then I think that will be a huge, breakthrough. And I believe AI can help to support because, again, it's how we use AI, right? Is it to what kind of data do we need? So we have to get this treasure in, treasure out data.
Yeah.
How do we use that to mobilize to the right parties that require such funding? How do we map investors into these projects? And how do we scale? A lot of the discussions today, it's still very much based on sources of funds like through zakat or through CSR or other forms of sources. But I think the question is, how do we scale this?
Right.
Yeah.
So it becomes the efficient and effective mobilization of capital for the benefit of the real economy. So effectively what you're saying is let's use this as a catalyst to do good. I'm conscious of time, so we've got a couple of minutes. Hurriyah, your closing statement, I
Sure.
guess, is going to turn
Thank you
into in
very
terms
much.
of how we develop, where you see the development going in
Yes.
the next few years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Actually, I lauded your question very well because it allows me to address the elephant in the room. Both AI and IF are very, very much misunderstood. Why I say so? If you remember when they just introduced ChatGPT, how many of us were so frightened of it, we think that, oh, it's going to be like Terminator kind of incident, the technology will take over the world. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back? So we were frightened of that. Likewise for Islamic finance, for Sharia, the moment I mentioned Sharia, I'm sure many of you thinking of hudud, qisas, polygamy and all that. But did you know, in the Quran, we have 6,236 verses, only 5 verses on marriage, only 1 verse on polygamy, and only 1 verse on regulation with respect to polygamy. Likewise, we have 1,142 verses on economy, over 1,000 on science, and less than 10 on qisas and hudud. Can you see? We are focusing on that small item, which are not really the core of the teaching, forgetting the bigger picture. It's just like when we talk about murabaha, when we talk about tawaruk, sorry to say, this is the differences of more notably between Indonesia and Malaysia, where because of this difference, it is so difficult for the two countries to talk with each other on Islamic finance. It's only tawaruk, which is actually disappearing as well, and the past by Ina, which is disappearing in Malaysia. But why don't we focus on the common thing instead, on what really matters? The problem with what really matters, of course, when we talk about privacy, is that, for example, Warren and Brandeis wrote about it since 1890, but we don't really have the common concept of what is privacy. Why? Because when we come to regulation, we like to measure with human standards. And human standards, my dear, is open to abuse, it's open to interpretation, and very subjective depending who write it. When the kind of culture around him and the people, the power around him. But Islam, Sharia, has a very easy approach to it, very easy. Because in Islam, anything for the commercial is halal until it is proven otherwise. So it's allowed. Whatever you want to do is allowed, unless if it is first criminal, then you cannot do it. Or it is a civil wrong. You can actually cause hurt or pain or whatever wrong to other people. Easy. If we use this standard, for example, so what can we do with artificial intelligence, for example? Make sure you do not use artificial intelligence to commit genocide. Make sure you don't use artificial intelligence to commit crimes, to spying on people, to prying on people. These are not allowed. So concentrate on what are common, then what are acceptable across the board. Use that principle as long as it's not actually tantamount to crime or civil wrong, then it is easier to come out and to come to a common standard. And the measure of success, because sometimes we overlook the fact, we think that, oh, because we are bigger, we are wealthier, the size of this artificial intelligence has reached this amount. Islamic finance, how many trillion? No, that shouldn't be the measure of success, because the longer we take a look at it, it will only counterproductive for us. what should be the measure of success is not the size of the success, is not the size of the customers, but will be innovative product and services. Then we know that we have embraced artificial intelligence when we have more innovative product and services. When there is an increase of inclusion and literacy, you wouldn't believe 13% of Muslims are in Indonesia, but our Islamic finance literacy is only 18%. So this is where artificial intelligence can really play the role. But of course, after we have the good quality data, not junk in, junk out. And then measure of IF contribution to real economy. This is another thing. This is the very distinguishing factor between Sharia or Islamic finance to conventional finance. We must contribute to real economy. We cannot mimic how they behave. That's why riba is prohibited. So if you want to see the real success of Islamic financial practices in certain countries, take a look at the contribution of the IFIs to the real economy. Because otherwise it's just on paper, it's just enriching certain number of groups, and this is not what Sharia aim for.
Okay, Hurriyah, I'm going to have to stop you there.
So
We've run out of time. Thank you for those comments. You've summarized everything very well. I'd like to leave you with a final message before I thank the members of the panel. I think we all see, and I hope that you can see, that Islamic finance is largely misunderstood and is an opportunity to educate yourself here. So we thank you for the opportunity to educate you a little. The same is true of AI. And I see Islamic finance and artificial intelligence the question is, how can we use this as a catalyst for positive change? So with that, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for your patient attention. Brother Ridzuan, Sister Hurriyah, Sister Dafinah, thank you so much. And I'll pass back to the MC.